Rural poverty skyrockets as jobs move away. The number of rural Americans living in poverty has skyrocketed in recent years amidst an economic evolution that has cost hundreds of thousands of manufacturing and mining jobs. Poverty rates have also increased in the nation's urban cores, which have generally recovered more quickly from the worst recession in modern history. The difference is that the increase in poverty in urban counties happened almost entirely during and after the recession. The increase in poverty in rural counties began around the turn of the century and has been exacerbated by the recession. After a decade of growth during the 1990s, the data show rural America has been effectively experienced its own recession for far longer than the nation as a whole. There were fairly sharp declines in the number of places characterized by high poverty rates in the 1990s, said Brian Thede, a demographer at Penn State and rural poverty released by the Carsey School of Public Policy at the University of New Hampshire. This is a pretty stark reversal from what was happening in the 1990s. At the turn of the century, about 1 in 5 rural counties had a poverty rate higher than 20%. Today, about 1 in 3 rural counties, 657 counties, have similarly high rates of poverty, the study found. At the same time, the share of urban counties with pervasive poverty has risen from just under 7% to just under 16%. Demographers and economists point to two self-reinforcing trends. Declines in traditional blue-collar jobs that rural America long relied upon have crippled dominant industries, while younger workers, especially those with higher levels of education, have fled rural areas, robbing their communities of the next generation of new business owners. Rural areas with low populations are far more likely to be reliant on a single industry than their larger metropolitan cousins. The dominant industries in many of those rural regions, manufacturing in the Midwest, resource extraction in Appalachia, have been experiencing long-term declines as automation increases and energy consumption evolves. About 15 years ago, 17% of Americans living in rural areas were employed in the manufacturing sector, Thede said. Today, just 10% of non-metro workers are employed in manufacturing. Since 2000, the number of manufacturing jobs in rural counties has declined by 20%. If you look at counties across the United States that are dependent on a single industry, like manufacturing or mining or farming, those are disproportionately non-metros, Thede said. This suggests that for these non-metro areas, this return to high poverty rates is driven by more secular declines. And that leads younger workers, those most likely to start new businesses, the main drivers in job creation, to look elsewhere for work. The demography of rural America has gotten older, whiter, and less educated as younger workers flee to larger communities. Rural America is increasingly inhabited by older and less skilled, less educated individuals, resulting in rising poverty rate, said Cheryl Russell, a demographer and editorial director of New Strategist Press. In this century so far, there's been a giant sucking sound coming from each major metropolitan area of the United States as it vacuums talent out of the surrounding small towns and rural areas. Russell pointed to a decline in mom-and-pop stores that once lined Main Street in rural communities and small towns. These stores have been increasingly squeezed by mega retailers like Walmart and dollar stores and by online retailers like Amazon. Those larger businesses offer products at lower prices, undercutting smaller businesses. They also pay lower wages. The global commodity market has also taken a toll on rural America. Coal, oil, and natural gas prices are down dramatically, leading some companies to shutter production. In some cases, new technology has helped. The fracking boom has severely reduced poverty in much of North Dakota, home to some of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation. If prices rebound, those areas dominated by extraction industries could stage a comeback, albeit one that reinforces a community's dependency on a single industry. In a decade in which larger cities and urban density has been prospering, smaller places in America's rural periphery has been struggling with a commodity down cycle. In Mark Morrow, Director of Policy at the Metropolitan Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. The recent firming of oil and gas prices may help in some places, but the broad trends remain challenging. The lack of jobs in rural America threatens to create a new generation of chronic poverty, Thede said. In 1980, 70% of rural Americans living in poverty were working, albeit in low-wage jobs. Today, less than half of the rural poor are working. That has contributed to a host of other societal problems, including the rising opioid epidemic and lower life expectancy for those living outside of cities. Long-term unemployment is correlated with all types of negative physiological outcomes, Thede said. That could lead to what he called the intergenerational transmission of poverty. Today, more than 20% of newborns in rural America are born into poverty. The numbers are far higher for African American and Hispanic residents living in rural areas. And those who are born into poverty have a far more difficult time climbing out of it than those whose parents have more financial stability. What's more, the social safety net as it exists today does less to help those facing chronic unemployment than those who are working, even in low-wage jobs. The safety net is increasingly geared towards workers. If we think about earned income tax credit and other safety nets, Thede said, those jobless poor are more at risk of falling through the safety net, experiencing really deep poverty. More facts to put on the heap. 2018 is going to be a really, really interesting year. And as a lot of commenters, black female commenters, as a matter of fact, have said, there are more white people that need a social safety net than black. They just are. The percentages may be skewed, but the fact is that there are. And that is more than likely what's driving the opioid epidemic. And in my estimation, it's probably why the Trump administration is not going to do anything about it. If you're cutting the safety net and you're actually making a requirement for these people to actually do work, basically what you're doing is you could be sacrificing rural America for the urban core, possibly because the urban core is going to cause more problems. But 2018 is going to be a reckoning. The end of the zero interest rates, or the ZIRP that we've been experiencing for the past 10 years, to keep the banks alive, to keep the banks on life support. Slowly but surely, I think the Fed is going to wean them off of this. And I think ZIRP is going to start being diminished worldwide. That great leveling that they talked about, I would say, good 6-7 years. I might find that article. Because I remember I was arguing with my circle mate about that. It has to be at least, I say at the very least, 6 years ago. But I'm going to find that original essay in Foreign Affairs and actually put that up so you guys can actually hear it and maybe even peruse it to see if what they talked about back then has come to pass. It was under the Obama administration. They were thinking about what they call global rebalancing or global leveling, where they were going to actually equalize what people were getting paid around the world, so that that the third world, the developing world, would be more competitive, not competitive, but get higher wages, in that it would bring down the competition for wages here in the United States. So this kind of thing has been coming for a very, very long time. They first started talking about this with the China price back in 2003. So it's been a very, very slow march towards this. And the fourth industrial revolution and automation and robotics and God knows what else is coming down the pike is just going to exacerbate this. They said the world ends with a whimper, not a bang. Hold on to your hats, folks. Hold on to your hats. 2018 is going to be a watershed moment. And have you noticed, as an aside, the silence that I hear from the black woman sphere of the internet. It's gotten awfully quiet. It's gotten awfully quiet. I think there's going to be way more cooperation in 2018 than there was in 2017, because the hammer is about to come down, whether we like it or not. So all you more brothers, get your budget together, get your diet together, get your health together, get out of debt, stay out of debt, live a modest life, and live free. And be nimble, because you never know when the hand of Allah or the hammer of Thor is going to come in your direction. You got to be ready to jump. But anyway, with that, I'm going to jump out of here. This is BGS out, and I'll see you guys on the next one.